On Christmas, I was working a double shift in the ER. My parents and brother told my 16-year-old son he couldn't come to the table. He had to drive home alone. I didn't lose my cool. I took action. The next morning, my parents found a letter at their door and lost it. My phone buzzed at 6:47 p.m. on Christmas Day. I was elbow deep in a trauma case, a 17-year-old who'd wrapped his car around a guardrail after hitting black ice on Route 9. His parents were in the waiting room, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, and I was holding together their son's spleen with sutures and sheer stubbornness. The nurses moved around me with practiced efficiency, handing instruments before I asked for them, anticipating the rhythm of the operation the way musicians anticipate each other in a jazz quartet. The buzz of my phone registered somewhere in my peripheral awareness, the way a clock ticks in a room you've stopped consciously hearing. By the time I scrubbed out, checked my pager, and found a quiet corner near the vending machines, 3 more messages had arrived. All from Marcus. The first one, "Dad, when are you getting off shift?" The second, "They said I can't sit at the table." The third, "I'm leaving. Going home." The fourth, "Please don't be mad. I just couldn't stay." I stood there in my scrubs, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a half-crushed coffee cup in my left hand. The vending machine hummed beside me, its display advertising energy bars and candy at holiday inflated prices. For about 10 seconds, I didn't understand what I was reading. The words made grammatical sense but refused to assemble into meaning. My son was at my parents' house for Christmas dinner. My parents had insisted on hosting this year, even though I was working the holiday shift. They'd practically demanded it, my mother calling 3 separate times in November to confirm Marcus would be there, to ask about his dietary preferences, to inquire about what time he'd arrive. Marcus had been excited about it. He'd bought my mother a scarf, picked it out himself from the department store downtown, spent 40 minutes deliberating between colors before settling on a soft burgundy that matched her favorite cardigan. He'd wrapped it in paper covered with cartoon penguins because he remembered she collected penguin figurines as a hobby, had been collecting them since before I was born. He'd spent 2 hours the night before choosing what to wear, settling on the button-down I'd bought him for his birthday, a deep blue that brought out his eyes. They said I can't sit at the table. I called him. He picked up on the second ring, and the background noise told me he was still in his car, the engine running, the heating probably blasting because he'd inherited my tendency to run cold. "Marcus. What happened?" His voice was quiet, the way it gets when he's trying not to cry in public. He's 16 years old, all gangly limbs and uncertain confidence, caught in that brutal stretch between childhood and whatever comes after. I remember being 16. I remember the desperate need to appear composed, to seem mature, to hold everything together even when the world felt like it was cracking beneath your feet. I got there and Grandma said they'd set up a TV tray for me in the den because there wasn't enough room at the table. There wasn't enough room. That's what she said. But Dad, Uncle Kevin's kids were at the table. All 3 of them. And Uncle Kevin's girlfriend. I saw them through the archway when I walked in. They were already seated. Already eating appetizers. Nobody even looked up. "Where are you now?" "Driving home. I'm on Route 12, just past the old mill." I didn't want to cause a scene. Grandma seemed annoyed that I was even asking about it, so I took the TV tray food to go and left. I told them I had homework, which is stupid because it's Christmas, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. The coffee cup in my hand collapsed completely. Lukewarm liquid splashed across my fingers and dripped onto the linoleum in a pattern that looked like a Rorschach test. I didn't move to clean it up. "You did nothing wrong," I said, keeping my voice steady through what felt like superhuman effort. "Drive safe. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. I'll be home by midnight." "Dad, I'm sorry." "Marcus. Listen to me carefully. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Do you understand?" A pause. I could hear his breathing, slightly unsteady. Then, "Yeah. Okay. I love you." "Love you too, Dad." I hung up and stood there for what must have been 2 full minutes, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles. A nurse walked by, Sandra, who'd been on shift with me for 12 years, and asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine. She didn't believe me, I could see it in her eyes, but she had 3 patients waiting in exam rooms and a waiting area full of holiday injuries, so she moved on with a backward glance that promised we'd talk later. "Here's what you need to understand about my family. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 43 years old, a trauma surgeon at Mercy General Hospital, divorced for 6 years, father to 1 son. I've spent my career putting broken bodies back together, and I'm good at it. The hospital keeps trying to promote me to administrative positions, but I refuse because I'd rather be in the OR than behind a desk. There's something pure about surgery, the problem is clear, the solution is technical, and the outcome is measurable. Family is nothing like that. Marcus is my only child. His mother, Claire, lives in Seattle now with her new husband, a software engineer named Tom who's perfectly pleasant and makes her happy in ways I never could. She's a good person, we simply couldn't make it work, and we share custody amicably enough. The divorce was my fault, mostly. I was working 90-hour weeks during my residency, then during my fellowship, then during the early years of my practice, and somewhere along the way I looked up and realized my wife had become a stranger who slept in the same bed. Marcus spends most of the year with me because he didn't want to switch schools when Claire moved. He chose to stay in Connecticut, chose to navigate the complexities of a split household, chose me. That choice humbles me every single day. He's a good kid. Quiet. Smart. Plays clarinet in the school band, second chair, though he's been practicing for first. Has a small group of loyal friends who come over for video game sessions on weekends and leave crumbs all over my living room, which I pretend to be annoyed about but secretly love because it means my house sounds like a home. He has a tendency to apologize for things that aren't his fault, a trait he inherited from me, a trait I've been trying to help him unlearn. My younger brother Kevin is 40 years old, works in pharmaceutical sales, and has the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. He drives a leased BMW he can't quite afford, wears suits that are slightly too expensive for his salary, and speaks with the easy assurance of someone who has never had to wonder whether he belongs in a room. He's been my parents' favorite since the day he was born. I understood this as a child, accepted it as a teenager, and made my peace with it as an adult. Some families have golden children. Kevin was ours. He could do no wrong. When he crashed my father's car at 19, racing his friends on the back roads of our suburb, it was because the brakes were faulty. When he dropped out of college after 2 semesters, it was because the professors didn't understand his potential. When his first marriage collapsed after he was caught with his assistant at a company conference, it was because his wife had been too demanding, too focused on her career, too unwilling to support his dreams. The girlfriend at Christmas dinner was named Brittany. 29 years old, blonde, worked as a dental hygienist at a practice in the next town over. I'd met her once, at Thanksgiving, where she'd spent most of the meal on her phone and referred to Marcus as the nephew as if he were a piece of furniture she couldn't quite place. She'd been with Kevin for 4 months. 4 months, and she'd earned a seat at my mother's table. My son, who'd been coming to that table since he was born, had been relegated to the den. My parents, Gerald and Patricia Reeves, are 71 and 68 years old respectively. They live in the same house where Kevin and I grew up, a colonial revival in Greenbrook Heights with a wraparound porch and a detached garage my father converted into a workshop he never uses. The workshop contains a table saw he bought in 1998, still in its original packaging, and shelves full of woodworking magazines he's never opened. It's a monument to hobbies never pursued, potential never realized. I find it oddly metaphorical. They are not cruel people, my parents. They have never raised a hand to either of their sons or grandchildren. They've never missed a birthday or a major holiday. They send cards, remember anniversaries, ask the right questions at the right times. They simply have a blind spot the size of a small moon, and that blind spot is named Kevin. Everything he does is remarkable. Everything I do is expected. The difference sounds subtle until you live with it for 4 decades. I finished my shift at 11:43 p.m. We lost the teenager with the spleen, his injuries were too extensive, his body too broken, and despite everything we tried, he slipped away at 10:17 while his mother screamed in the waiting room and his father stood in the corner staring at nothing. I was the one who had to tell them. I've delivered that news more times than I can count, and it never gets easier. The mother hit my chest with her fists, not hard, just desperate, looking for somewhere to put her grief. The father thanked me for trying, which was somehow worse. By the time I got to my car, the parking lot was silent except for the wind and the distant wail of an ambulance bringing in another broken body for us to try to fix. Marcus was asleep on the couch when I got home, the television playing some nature documentary about polar bears. He'd left the porch light on for me, the way he always does when I'm working late. The pasta container was on the counter, untouched, its lid still sealed. He hadn't eaten anything. I stood in the doorway of the living room and watched my son sleep. He'd kicked off his good shoes but was still wearing the button-down, now wrinkled and untucked, the collar slightly askew. His face, in the blue glow of the television, looked younger than 16. It looked like the face of the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, convinced that my presence could keep him safe from lightning. The boy who believed I could fix anything. The boy who trusted the world because he'd never been given a reason not to. My parents had given him a reason. I didn't wake him. I covered him with a blanket from the hall closet, turned off the television, and went to my office. The room smells like old books and leather. I'd furnished it to look like the study I'd always imagined having, back when I thought becoming a doctor would solve all my problems. From the bottom drawer of my desk, I pulled out a manila folder I hadn't opened in almost 2 years. Inside were documents, letters, receipts. A paper trail of favors, bailouts, and one-way generosity spanning 2 decades. I'd started keeping records when I was 31, after Kevin asked me to co-sign a loan he then defaulted on, leaving me to pay $47,000 I didn't have. I'd had to refinance my house to cover it. My parents had scolded me for making a fuss about it. "He's your brother," my mother had said, her voice thick with disappointment, directed at me, not Kevin. Family helps family. I sat at my desk until 3 a.m., reading through 12 years of documented history. Every check I'd written. Every wire transfer I'd sent. Every time I'd answered the phone at midnight to hear Kevin's panicked voice explaining his latest crisis. Then I pulled out a legal pad and began to write. Update 1. The letter was 3 pages long. I wrote it by hand because typed words felt too impersonal, too corporate, for what I needed to say. It took me 4 drafts to get it right. The first was too angry, the second too apologetic, the third too cold. The fourth found the balance I was looking for, measured, factual, final. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up over the tree line behind my house, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and my coffee had gone cold twice. I drove to my parents' house at 7:30 a.m. on December 26. The streets were empty, that particular quiet that settles over suburbs the morning after a holiday. Christmas lights still blinked on porches, their timers not yet reset. Inflatable snowmen sagged in yards, slowly deflating as the season wound down. A single jogger passed me, breath pluming in the cold air, earbuds in, oblivious to everything but her own rhythm. I parked at the end of their driveway, walked to the front door, and slipped the envelope through the mail slot. The brass flap closed with a soft clank. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't knock. I simply delivered the letter and left. My mother called me 47 minutes later. I was back home by then, sitting in my kitchen, eating toast I couldn't taste. "Daniel." Her voice was sharp, the way it gets when she's been caught off guard and doesn't like it. "What is the meaning of this?" I think the letter speaks for itself. "You cannot be serious." I've never been more serious about anything in my life. A pause. I could hear my father in the background, asking what was happening, his voice muffled as if he were in another room. My mother shushed him with the efficiency of 45 years of marriage. "You're cutting us off because of a seating arrangement?" "No. I'm cutting you off because you told my son he wasn't welcome at your table. I'm cutting you off because you've spent 30 years treating Kevin like a crown prince and me like the help. I'm cutting you off because I've finally realized that no amount of patience, understanding, or familial obligation is going to change that dynamic. The seating arrangement was just the last straw. It was the clearest, most undeniable proof that my son means less to you than Kevin's girlfriend of 4 months. We didn't say he wasn't welcome. You put him in the den with a TV tray while his cousins sat at the dining room table. He's 16 years old. He drove himself to your house on Christmas Day to spend time with his family. He brought you a gift he picked out himself. And you shuffled him off to another room like an inconvenient houseguest. He's not an afterthought to be hidden away when the real family arrives. He's my son. There simply wasn't room. There are 8 chairs at that table, and you had 7 people. I know this because I've counted those chairs every Thanksgiving and Christmas for the past 20 years. You made room for Kevin's girlfriend, a woman you've known for 4 months. You couldn't make room for your grandson, a child you've known since birth." Silence. I could hear her breathing, slightly unsteady. "The letter outlines everything," I continued. "Every loan I've covered, every financial crisis I've solved, every time I've put my own life on hold to clean up Kevin's messes while you stood by and watched. Consider this my resignation from the position of family safety net. You can't just..." "I can. I have. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and turned off my phone. Let me tell you what was in that letter. Page 1 covered the financial history. The co-signed loan Kevin defaulted on in 2013, the one that forced me to refinance my house. The $15,000 I wired to bail him out of a failed business venture in 2016, a juice bar franchise that collapsed within 8 months because Kevin lost interest and stopped showing up. The $8,500 I paid to cover his rent when he was between jobs in 2018, money he swore he'd repay within 6 weeks and never mentioned again. The legal fees I covered when his first wife sued for back child support in 2020, $12,000 because Kevin had stopped paying when he started dating someone new and decided his old family wasn't worth the expense. The emergency dental work I paid for because he'd let his insurance lapse in 2022, another $4,500 that vanished into the void of Kevin's financial chaos. In total, over 12 years, I had given or loaned Kevin approximately $127,000. He had repaid exactly $3,200, and that only because our father had guilted him into a single payment after I'd made the mistake of mentioning it at a family gathering. Page 2 addressed the emotional toll. The birthdays forgotten, mine, not Kevin's, because Kevin's birthdays were 3-day celebrations while mine were afterthoughts. The graduations missed. Kevin had shown up late to my medical school ceremony, complained about the parking, and left before the reception. The phone calls that only came when someone needed something. I detailed the Thanksgiving when Kevin had arrived drunk and called Marcus a weird little bookworm in front of the entire family, and my parents had laughed it off as Kevin being Kevin, as if cruelty were just another charming personality quirk. I mentioned the summer my father had flown to Vegas to help Kevin through a gambling debt crisis. The trip had cost thousands, though my parents had never told me the exact amount, canceling the fishing trip he'd planned with Marcus in the process. A trip Marcus had been looking forward to for months. A trip I'd helped Marcus plan, picking out lures and studying maps of the lake where they were supposed to go. Page 3 was the hardest to write. It outlined my terms. I would no longer attend family gatherings where Kevin was present. I would not accept phone calls that began with requests for money or mediation. I would not pretend, for the sake of holiday photos and family unity, that the past 30 years hadn't happened. I would not smile for the camera while my son was treated like a second-class citizen. I would not watch Kevin bask in attention while Marcus faded into the background. My son would not be taught that his worth depended on his ability to be convenient. If my parents wanted a relationship with Marcus and me, they would need to demonstrate, through actions rather than words, that they valued us as much as they valued Kevin. They would need to stop making excuses for his behavior. They would need to acknowledge the patterns that had defined our family for decades. And they would need to commit, genuinely and consistently, to treating Marcus with the same warmth and attention they showed Kevin's children. The letter ended with a single line: I hope you choose differently, but I won't be holding my breath. My mother called 17 more times over the next 3 days. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages progressed from angry to pleading to resentful, a predictable cycle I'd witnessed many times before, usually directed at someone other than me. My father sent a text, a technological feat for a man who barely understood how to open email, that read simply, "This is ridiculous. Call your mother." I did not call my mother. Kevin called on December 28th. I answered that one because I was curious what angle he'd take. "Bro, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. She's been crying for 2 days straight." I sent a letter. "She can share it with you if she wants." She did. I read it. "I gotta say, man, I think you're being a little dramatic. It's not like we locked Marcus in a closet or something. You put him in a separate room while everyone else ate together. It was just logistics. There wasn't room. There were 8 chairs and 7 people." A pause. "Okay, maybe Mom miscounted or something. I don't know. The point is, it's just dinner. Marcus is a teenager, he probably didn't even care where he sat. He cried on the drive home, Kevin. He thought he'd done something wrong. He spent the whole drive trying to figure out what he could have said or done to make Grandma put him in another room." Another pause. "Well, that's... Look, kids are sensitive. He'll get over it. Kevin, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. I don't expect you to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't expect you to agree with it. I genuinely don't care what you think about any of it. Your opinion on my life and my decisions stopped mattering to me years ago. But if you ever, make my son feel unwelcome again, if you ever treat him like he's less than your kids or your girlfriend or anyone else in your orbit, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. One you won't enjoy." Is that a threat? It's a promise. Goodbye, Kevin. I hung up and blocked his number. Marcus came into my office that evening while I was reviewing patient files. The hospital had sent home a stack of administrative paperwork that was somehow more exhausting than 12-hour surgeries. He stood in the doorway, looking uncertain, the way he does when he's working up to saying something difficult. "Dad? Are we not going to see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I set down my pen, pushed back from the desk. "Come here. Sit." He sat in the leather chair across from my desk, the one I'd bought specifically so he'd have somewhere comfortable when he wanted to talk. When he was younger, he'd curl up in that chair with a book while I worked late, content just to be in the same room. He's too old now for lap sitting, but not too old to need his father's attention. "I sent a letter to your grandparents," I said. It explained how I feel about what happened on Christmas, and about some other things that have been building up for a long time. Things that started before you were born. Am I in trouble? Absolutely not. You didn't do anything wrong. I want you to understand that completely. The adults in this situation failed you. Not the other way around." He was quiet for a moment, processing. I watched him think, the slight furrow of his brow, the way he chewed his lower lip, habits he'd had since he was 5. "So, we're not doing Christmas with them anymore?" "I don't know yet. That depends on what happens next. What I do know is that I'm not going to put you in a situation where you're treated like you don't matter. You matter. You matter more than any of them. More than my relationship with my parents, more than keeping the peace, more than family tradition. None of those things mean anything if you have to suffer for them." His eyes got bright, the way they do before tears he's trying to hold back. "Okay. I love you. Whatever happens with them, that doesn't change. Nothing could ever change that. I love you too, Dad." He got up, crossed to my side of the desk, and hugged me. He's almost as tall as I am now, 5'10" to my 6 feet, growing what seems like an inch a month. In a year, maybe 2, he'll be looking down at me. But right now, in this moment, he was still my kid, and I was still the person he trusted to keep him safe. I held on for as long as he needed. Update 2. 3 weeks passed. January arrived with a cold snap that kept the ER busy with slip and fall injuries, hypothermia cases, frostbite, and the usual winter surge of respiratory infections. Every shift brought new challenges: an elderly woman who'd fallen on ice outside her apartment, a construction worker whose space heater had malfunctioned, a family of 4 who'd run out of heating oil and spent 2 nights in their car. I threw myself into work, partly because the work was there and partly because it gave me something to focus on besides the silence from Greenbrook Heights. Marcus went back to school after winter break. He seemed lighter, somehow. Less anxious. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for years, a tension I'd noticed but hadn't fully understood, was beginning to ease. He laughed more easily. He volunteered opinions at dinner instead of waiting to be asked. One evening, while we were eating takeout Thai because neither of us felt like cooking, he said something that stopped me mid-bite. "Dad, I think I used to be scared of them." "Of who?" "Grandma and Grandpa. And Uncle Kevin." He poked at his pad Thai with his chopsticks, rearranging the noodles without eating them. "Not scared like afraid they'd hurt me. Just scared of disappointing them, I guess. Like I was always trying to be good enough and it never worked. Like no matter what I did, I was never going to be as interesting as the other grandkids." I set down my fork. "I know exactly what you mean." "Really?" "I spent most of my life trying to earn their approval. Worked my way through medical school, became a surgeon, built a good life. Saved lives. Published papers. Won awards. None of it was ever quite enough. There was always something Kevin did that was more impressive, more worthy of their attention. When I graduated first in my class, they talked about Kevin's new car. When I got my first attending position, they talked about Kevin's promotion. It was like competing against someone playing a completely different game, with rules only they knew." Marcus nodded slowly. "That sucks." I laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Yeah. It does. So what changed? Why did you put up with it for so long?" It was a good question. A question I'd been asking myself for weeks. I think. I kept hoping. I kept believing that if I just did enough, achieved enough, proved myself enough times, they'd finally see me. Finally value me the way they valued him. And then you came along, and I thought maybe it would be different for you. That they'd love you without conditions because you were new, because you hadn't spent decades not being Kevin. I paused, finding the words. Watching them treat you the way they treated me, that was the thing I couldn't accept. I could take it for myself. I couldn't take it for you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Thanks, Dad. For standing up. I should have done it years ago. Maybe. But you did it now. That's what matters." We finished dinner in comfortable silence, and then he went upstairs to do homework while I cleaned up the containers. The call came on January 19th, a Sunday afternoon. I was in the garage, attempting to fix a leaky faucet that had been dripping for 3 months. The rhythmic plunk 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 had become background noise, barely noticeable until you tried to sleep. My phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Daniel? It's Brittany. Kevin's girlfriend. The one who'd been at Christmas dinner, seated comfortably at the table while my son ate alone in the den. What do you want? Look, I know you probably hate me right now, and honestly, I get it. But I need to tell you something, and Kevin can never know I called." I set down the wrench, wiped my hands on a rag. "I'm listening." That night, at Christmas? I didn't know about Marcus getting put in the other room until after he left. I was in the bathroom when he arrived, and by the time I came out, everyone was already seated. Kevin told me there wasn't enough room for the kid, so he was eating in the den. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to cause drama on my first Christmas with his family, so I didn't say anything. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because of what happened after. When your letter arrived, Kevin lost it. I mean, really lost it. He was screaming, throwing things around the living room. He punched a hole in your parents' wall. Your mom was beside herself about the plaster. He said you were trying to tear the family apart, that you'd always been jealous of him, that you'd turned Marcus against everyone. He called you names I won't repeat. Your mom was crying, your dad was trying to calm everyone down, and Kevin just kept raging like a toddler who'd been told no for the first time in his life. It was a whole scene. None of this is surprising." "Yeah, but here's the thing. Your mom, Patricia, she kept saying she didn't understand what the big deal was. She kept defending herself, saying she'd made a simple mistake, that you were overreacting, that families work these things out. And Kevin's daughter, the oldest one, Emma? She said something I can't get out of my head." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Why does Grandma always act like Marcus doesn't exist?' Just like that, totally casual, like she was asking why the sky is blue. And nobody had an answer. The room just went quiet. Your mom got this look on her face, like she'd been slapped, and then she went to her room and didn't come out for the rest of the night. Kevin tried to dismiss it, said Emma was being dramatic, but even he looked rattled. I leaned against the workbench, processing. Emma was 14. Old enough to notice patterns. Old enough to ask uncomfortable questions that adults had learned to avoid. Why are you really calling me, Brittany? A long pause. Because I've been with Kevin for almost 5 months now, and I'm starting to see things. The way he talks about you, about Marcus, about everyone who isn't him. The way your parents excuse everything he does, no matter how ridiculous. The way he treats waiters and clerks and anyone he thinks is below him. The way he expects the world to bend around his convenience. Another pause. I've dated some losers in my time, Daniel. I know the signs. I just didn't want to see them. That's not really my problem. No, I know. I wanted you to know that you're not crazy. What you're seeing is real. The favoritism, the excuses, the double standards, all of it. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about Marcus. He seems like a really good kid. He didn't deserve what happened. He is. And you're right, he didn't. Okay. I'm going to go now. Please don't tell anyone I called. I won't. She hung up, and I stood in my garage for a long time, staring at the half-fixed faucet. Brittany's call didn't change anything, not really. The facts were what they were, whether or not she validated them. But it did something I hadn't expected. It cracked open a door I'd kept sealed for decades. The door behind which I'd stored all my doubts, all the times I'd wondered if I was overreacting, all the moments when my parents had made me feel like the crazy one for noticing what was right in front of my face. Someone from the outside had seen it too. Someone who had no reason to take my side had looked at my family and noticed the same dysfunction I'd been living with my entire life. That mattered more than I expected. 3 days later, my father appeared at my door. I was home alone. Marcus was at band practice, preparing for a February concert, and I just finished reviewing a particularly complex case file when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see my father's familiar silhouette. Broad shoulders, slight stoop from decades of desk work, the outline of the wool coat he'd owned since I was in high school. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Daniel. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and there was a weariness in his posture I'd never noticed before. Can I come in? That depends on why you're here. I want to talk. Just talk. No yelling, no accusations. Just a conversation between a father and his son. I considered closing the door. Instead, I stepped back and let him in. We sat in the living room, him on the couch where Marcus had slept on Christmas night, me in the armchair across from him. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock I'd inherited from my maternal grandmother, the one person in my childhood who'd seemed to see me clearly. Your mother is a wreck, he said. She hasn't slept properly since your letter arrived. She's lost weight. She spends hours looking at old photo albums, crying. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me is. She's my mother, and I don't want her to suffer. But the rest of me thinks maybe she should have felt this uncomfortable a long time ago. Maybe if she'd been uncomfortable earlier, we wouldn't be here now. He rubbed his face with both hands, the way he does when he's frustrated. I didn't come here to argue. Then why did you come? Because I've been thinking. Since your letter arrived, I haven't been able to stop thinking. About what you wrote. About all of it. About the last 40 years. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, looking at the floor. I didn't know about the money. The amounts, I mean. Your mother handled most of the family finances. She'd tell me Kevin needed help, I'd say fine, and that was that. I didn't realize how much you'd been covering. I didn't realize it was coming from you instead of. I don't know, I thought it was coming from family savings, or from somewhere abstract. I didn't think about where the money was actually coming from. Would it have mattered if you had? He didn't answer immediately. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. I'm not here to make excuses, he finally said. I've been married to your mother for 45 years, and I love her, but I'm starting to see some things I didn't want to see. Things I've been avoiding for a very long time. Such as? The way she talks about Kevin versus the way she talks about you. The way she lights up when he walks in the room, and the way she doesn't, when you do. The way she remembers every detail of Kevin's life and forgets the basics of yours. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. The way she forgets to ask about Marcus. I noticed it at Thanksgiving, before any of this happened. He was telling a story about his band concert, excited about a solo he'd earned, and she just walked away in the middle of it. Went to get more wine. Didn't even notice she'd done it. Didn't come back to ask him to finish the story. I remembered that moment. I'd seen it happen. I'd told myself it didn't mean anything. Why are you telling me this now? Because Emma asked a question, and your mother couldn't answer it. Because I watched her face when a 14-year-old pointed out something we'd all been pretending didn't exist. And because I've spent 45 years convincing myself that everything was fine, that you were fine, that you didn't need as much attention because you were always so capable. So independent. So reliable. His voice cracked slightly. But that's not true, is it? You needed attention. You needed to be seen. You just learned not to ask for it because asking never worked. The words hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years building walls against exactly this kind of acknowledgement, because I'd stopped believing it would ever come. What do you want from me, Dad? I want a chance to fix this. Not all at once. Not overnight. But I want to try. I want to know my grandson before he's grown and gone. I want to know my son, really know him, instead of just assuming I do because we share a last name. And Mom? He sighed. Your mother is who she is. She loves Kevin in a way that blinds her to everything else. I don't know if that can change. She doesn't see it as favoritism, she sees it as Kevin needing more, being more vulnerable, requiring more attention. In her mind, you've always been strong enough to handle things on your own, so she gave her energy to the one she thought couldn't manage without it. It's not fair, but I'm not sure she's capable of seeing it differently. He looked up at me directly, something he rarely did. But I can change. Or at least, I can try. I sat with that for a long moment. Outside, a car drove past, its engine fading into the winter quiet. Here's what I need, I said. I need you to understand that this isn't about Christmas dinner. This is about 16 years of watching my son be treated like an afterthought. This is about 30 years of being the reliable one while Kevin gets celebrated for mediocrity. This is about a lifetime of feeling invisible in my own family. Can you understand that? I'm trying to. Trying isn't enough. Not anymore. If you're here to patch things up just enough to get back to normal, I'm not interested. Normal wasn't working. Normal was killing me, and it was starting to kill Marcus too. I watched my son learn that his worth depended on being convenient, on not making waves, on accepting whatever crumbs of attention were left over after Kevin and his kids got theirs. I'm not willing to let him learn that lesson any deeper. He looked at me directly, really looked, in a way I don't think he ever had before. I'm here because my grandson drove home alone on Christmas Day thinking he'd done something wrong. I'm here because a 14-year-old girl said something that should have been obvious to everyone. I'm here because when I read your letter, I couldn't argue with a single thing you wrote. That's not okay. None of it has ever been okay. The silence stretched between us. 43 years of history. All the baseball games he'd missed for Kevin's concerts. All the graduations where his attention had been elsewhere. All the small erosions that had, over time, worn down to bedrock. You can start by calling Marcus, I said. Not to apologize for Christmas, that apology needs to come in person, and it needs to wait until you can mean it. Just call to talk. Ask him about school. About his music. About his life. Be interested. Be present. Show him that he matters through actions, not just words. I can do that. And Mom? I'll talk to her. I can't promise she'll change, but I can promise I'll stop pretending everything's fine when it isn't. I'll stop enabling her blind spot. He stood up slowly, joints creaking with age. At the door, he paused. I'm proud of you, Daniel. I don't think I've said that enough. I'm proud of the man you've become and the father you are. Marcus is lucky to have you. I didn't trust myself to speak. I nodded. He left, and I stood in the empty living room, feeling something shift inside me. Not resolution, that would take time, if it came at all. But something that might, eventually, become the foundation for something better. Marcus came home from band practice an hour later, cheeks flushed from the cold, clarinet case in hand. Was that Grandpa's car I saw leaving? It was. What did he want? I considered how to answer. He wanted to apologize. And to try to do better. Marcus set down his clarinet case. Do you believe him? I believe he wants to try. Whether he can actually do it remains to be seen. What about Grandma? That's more complicated. She's not ready to see what she's done wrong. She might never be. He nodded slowly, processing with the quiet intensity that characterized everything he did. Okay. Can I have a snack? I'm starving. I laughed, a real laugh, the first one in weeks. Yeah. There's leftover pizza in the fridge. He headed for the kitchen, and I watched him go. 16 years old, growing up faster than I could track, navigating a family landscape that had suddenly become unfamiliar terrain. But he was handling it. We both were. The weeks that followed brought small changes. My father called Marcus twice that week, once to ask about an upcoming concert and once just to check in. The conversations were brief but genuine, awkward, sometimes, the way conversations are when people are learning new habits. Marcus reported them to me with cautious optimism, as if testing whether this new reality would hold. My mother remained silent. I wasn't surprised. Kevin, predictably, escalated. He sent a 6-paragraph email accusing me of poisoning our father against him, of destroying the family for petty grievances, of being jealous of his success. The email contained no acknowledgement of anything he'd done wrong, no recognition of Marcus's hurt, no attempt at understanding. It was pure victimhood, dressed up in indignation. I read it once, noted the complete absence of self-reflection, and deleted it without responding. Brittany called once more, briefly, to let me know she'd ended things with Kevin. It wasn't just the family stuff, she said. It was everything. The way he talked about his kids when they weren't around. The way he expected me to be grateful for the privilege of being with him. The way he lied about little things, constantly, as if truth was just another inconvenience. I couldn't do it anymore. I wished her well and meant it. By February, a tentative new pattern had emerged. My father and I met for coffee every other week. We talked, really talked, about things we'd never discussed. His regrets about missing my childhood events. His own complicated relationship with his father, a stern man who'd believed in tough love and emotional distance. The ways he'd convinced himself that loving 2 sons equally meant treating them differently, and how wrong that calculation had been. Your mother loved Kevin more, he said one afternoon, stirring his coffee without drinking it. I've never said that out loud before. Not even to myself, really. But it's true. She loved you too, but with Kevin, it was different. Fiercer. More desperate, somehow. Like she saw something of herself in him that she didn't see in you. I know. I should have balanced that. I should have given you more to make up for what she couldn't. Instead, I just went along with it. It was easier. And I told myself you didn't mind, because you never complained. I complained plenty. You just didn't hear it. He nodded, accepting the criticism. I hear it now. Progress, like I said, takes time. There were setbacks. My mother sent a birthday card to Marcus that was clearly a peace offering, but she signed it Grandma and Grandpa without any acknowledgement of what had happened. The card contained a generic message, the kind you write when you don't really know the person you're writing to. My father apologized for it, admitted he hadn't known she was sending it, and promised to address it with her. Whether he did, I never found out. What I did know was this: my son was thriving. He made first chair in the clarinet section, beating out a senior who'd held the position for 3 years. He started tutoring younger students in algebra, discovering a talent for teaching that surprised us both. He had patience I didn't know he possessed, and a gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms. He joined the school's environmental club and came home full of facts about renewable energy and carbon offsets, planning projects that might actually make a difference. He was growing into the person he was meant to be, unencumbered by the weight of trying to please people who would never be satisfied. And me? I was learning to set boundaries without guilt. To prioritize the people who showed up for me rather than the ones who expected me to show up for them. To be the father my son deserved rather than the son my parents wanted. The last conversation I had with my mother was in late March. She called unexpectedly, her voice measured in a way that suggested rehearsal. I've been thinking about what you wrote. I'm listening. I don't agree with all of it. I think you've exaggerated some things, and I think you've misunderstood my intentions more than once. But I've been thinking about Marcus. About that night. A pause. I didn't mean to hurt him. What did you mean to do? I don't know. Kevin's children were there, and Brittany, and there was so much going on, and I made a decision without thinking. The den seemed like a reasonable solution at the moment. A solution to what problem, Mom? Having too much family? That's not, she stopped. Maybe it was. Maybe that's exactly what it said to him. It is. A long silence. I don't know how to fix this, Daniel. I don't know how to be different than I've always been. That's the problem, Mom. You're not trying to be different. You're trying to make this go away so everything can go back to how it was. I'm not interested in how it was. I'm interested in how it could be. And what does that look like? It looks like treating Marcus with the same warmth you show Kevin's kids. It looks like acknowledging that you've played favorites for 30 years. It looks like doing the work, not just saying the words. It looks like genuine effort, day after day, even when it's hard. Even when it doesn't come naturally. I don't know if I can do that. Then I don't know if we have anything else to talk about. She didn't call again. Part of me grieved for the relationship we'd never have, the mother-son bond I'd seen other people enjoy, the easy warmth I'd watched between my colleagues and their parents. The larger part accepted that you cannot force people to love you the way you need to be loved. You can only choose what you're willing to accept. Summer arrived. Marcus turned 17. We threw him a small party, a few friends, a homemade cake, music playing in the backyard while teenagers clustered around the fire pit exchanging stories and inside jokes I wasn't meant to understand. My father came alone, bearing a gift he'd chosen himself, a high-quality music stand Marcus had mentioned wanting months earlier. I remember you said something about the school ones being wobbly, he said, almost shy. I hope this is the right kind. Marcus grinned, genuine and uncomplicated. It's perfect. Thanks, Grandpa. They hugged, and I watched from the kitchen window, feeling something settle in my chest. Not everything was fixed. Some things never would be. But in that moment, watching my father try to be present, watching my son accept the effort for what it was, I understood that healing doesn't require completion. Sometimes it just requires beginning. The story doesn't have a neat ending. My mother and I remain estranged. Kevin has moved on to a new girlfriend and, presumably, a new set of problems he'll expect someone else to solve. My father and I continue our coffee meetings, building something that should have been built decades ago. But Marcus is happy. He's healthy. He knows his worth. And every morning when I wake up and see the family we've become, smaller, perhaps, but stronger, I know I made the right choice. Some doors, once closed, don't need to reopen. Some relationships run their course. The measure of a life isn't how many people you keep in it, but whether the people who remain make it richer. My son makes my life richer. That's enough. Moral reflection. There is a quiet courage in choosing peace over people pleasing, in recognizing that the family you build matters as much as the family you're born into. Love is not an obligation to endure mistreatment, it is a garden that requires tending from both sides. When we teach our children that they deserve respect,